Good morning. We're learning as chutz for Shleim for Len Chai Basarach and for Aliyah for the Neshama of Meir ben Elazar. We are, I believe, on the top of Nun Velv Amid Beis, one line from the top, second line. We're still in the Mishnah, just to remind us of where we are in this parak, right? We had the first two Mishnayos of the parak, which talked about Elu Trefus Bebehema and Elu Ksheris Bebehema. And so far we saw Elu Trefus Ba'if. So in the listing of the things that are Trefus Ba'if, we said Nafla La'ur, if a strange case, I don't even really understand how it happened, but the animal fell into a fire. You look at the Bnei Me'ayim. If they turned green, then it's treifa. If it turned red, then it's kosher. Amr Rav Yechim Mishum B'Yosef ben Yeshua. I shouldn't say turned red. If it's red, it's kosher. Amr Rav Yechim Mishum B'Yosef ben Yeshua. Shir Yekru. Yirei Kasan Kashir Nekuvasan. The shear of how much has to turn green in order for it to passel is the same shear as its as what of how much of a whole passels it. Just like a nekuva, there's a puncture, it's any amount, so too the greening, the turning green from the fire, also will passel with a mashnu. I mean, I get the idea is that it works the other way around as well. That if you have a part, like for example, the liver, we said you need it could be kosher as long as there's more than a kazayas left, or I think it was the trachea. We said it doesn't get possible with a hole with a nekev. It needs to be fully cut, so you'd have to have a similar type of greening in order for that to passel. Depends on each organ. What happened if the liver turned green opposite the intestines? I should point out that the Bnei Me'ayim is a flexible term in the use of the Gemara and the Mishnah. I've seen stated that it's used differently. In the Mishnah, it generally means the whole innards. In the Gemara, it generally means the intestines, but I think it can sometimes switch one way or the other. In this case, obviously, it doesn't mean Bnei Me'ayim, meaning the entire innards. It's talking about a specific area of the liver, where it's opposite the intestines. Amalei Treifa says it's Treifa. For Zakdev Nitla. So he says, how could that be? Even if you took away the kaved, it would be kosher. How could you say that, right? We said as long as you have like certain parts left where it enters the makom chiburoi. But so how could you say that if it turned green, that's going to passel it? Amarava kibin shahayrika kaved keneged me'ayim biyadu shenafel la'ar b'nechu b'nei me'ayim v'tarfa. Says it's not the actual kaved that's the problem. It seems that the kaved covered over the intestines over there. It wasn't accessible. There's a long discussion about why you don't just look at the intestines themselves. But it's an indicator on the intestines that they were turned green, that they were actually the ones that were burnt. So it's not that the kaved is what makes it a treifa, but it's an indicator that the intestines made it a treifa. He had a tarnagolis with one of these types of problems. It was burnt and it got green on the Bnei Me'ayim. Shadri l'kamei Rabbi Elazar hakafer beribi. He brought him in front of Rabbi Elazar hakafer beribi, the great one. Amale yerukin hava v'achshrei. He said they're green and they're kosher. Safrekdamar v'anan tnan yeroikim psulin. Our Mishnah says that if the Bnei Me'ayim are yeroikim, they're apostle. Those are only the other organs in the gizzard and in the heart and in the liver. Tanya nami hachi, meaning in the liver, not opposite the intestines, the rest of the liver. Tanya nami hachi be'elu b'nei me'ayim amru b'korkum b'leva b'kovid. Only in those organs, and he was talking about where it was green on the intestines themselves, and that does possible. If you talk about Yosef Havle, I'm sorry, that would say it's possible is only on these parts. I guess the covet opposite the intestines. But on the Bnei Me'ayim, the green does not possible it. Tanya nami hachi be'elu bnei me'ayim amru b'korkum b'leva b'kovet. Yisur by Yosef Havle hahu tarnagoyl shadul l'kamei derevavo. He also brought the tarnagoyls to be checked by Ravo. V'amle adum havu v'tarfa. He says they're red and therefore they're treif. Banantan adumim ksherim. We said adumim is kosher in our Mishnah. Now why are you saying that they're green, they're red and they're treif? Amalei adumim shahiriku v'yeroikon shahidimu treifa. Says it doesn't either way. A organ that was red that turned green is treif, and a green organ that turned red is also treif. So the intestines start off as green. They start off as hayriku. If they turn red, that's an indicator that they were burnt. He only said that red is kosher on the original, the same three that we've been talking about, that those are supposed to be red and they turn green. But on the Bnei Me'ayim, that are supposed to be green and they turn red, they're going to be pasul with red. Amar Shua Bar Chia Amar Rav Mani. Adayim shahiriku, if you have one of these three organs that we said, if they get in a fire and they turn green, they become treifa. If you shulkan, if you cook them, you boil them in water, and that causes them to become red again, means after you checked and you said, these look like they're treif, but I'm going to boil them, and then that brings them back to be red. Ksherin. Then they're kosher. My taiba, why is that? Kutra ayalhu. In that case, we ascribe that the greenness was not because of it was burnt, but because of the smoke of the fire. The smoke can also affect, but the smoke doesn't kill the animal, unlike what your local fire department would say. But they say that it doesn't make it into a treifa. So the smoke caused it to become green, but by boiling it, that will remove the green from the smoke. And then if it turns back to its regular red color, it's kosher. If you have something that's red that did not turn green, the shulkan, and then you smoke it and it turns green, treifa becomes treifa. My timing, loy basiyayu. What happened over there was it really was burnt, but the smoke covered it over with a redness. When you wash off the smoke and it goes back to green, then you see that it's a treif. Rashi said, therefore, if you know that an animal was in a fire, you should boil it to make sure that its treifa state, whatever the case may be, depending on which kind of organ it is, if it's originally green or originally red, you should boil it to make sure that it's not treifa and it's just covered over with smoke. It's not necessary for you to assume this possibility that this smoke is that it's really treifa and you can't see it. You don't take it away from its chazaka of being kosher. Darsa treifa b'kaisel. We said in the Mishnah, very similar to what we had by the behemoth. We said that if it hits into a kaisel, if it fell, there's a shock. So you have to see if it flutters in the case of a bird as opposed to standing in the case of an animal, and then you wait 24 hours. And this we had by the behemoth as well. We had a shita that said that whether whatever it was that caused the animal to get knocked out, You have to check it. It's even if it even if it lasted for 24 hours, you still have to do a bedika after you shecht it to see if there was any damage caused that made it into a treifa. You have to check the bone, the structural system. Give me 1 minute. I'll be right back. I don't know. I was thinking to try learning outside without tissues. Who ever heard of a yid without hay fever? Okay, Zok the Mishnah. Like I said, we're now up to the fourth in the sequence, right? We did the Elu Treifis Behema, Elu Ksheris Behema, then we did Elu Treifis Ba'oif, and now we're up to Elu Ksheris Ba'oif. Elu Ksheris Ba'oif, and these are Kasha Ba'oif. Nikva Hagageris Aishanistika, if the Gagaris, which is the trachea, right? The trachea is the less Chamordika, one of the two Simonim. If it got a Nekev does not passel by the Kana. Aishanistika, if it's split, meaning if the first and the last rings of the trachea are intact and it just split on the rest, it's kosher. Hiksa chuld al roisha makom she'ena oisas treifa. If it got bit on the head by a weasel, not by it didn't go through the brain membrane. It went on a different part of the head. Nikaf hazakaf zefak. If it made a hole in the crop, this is the way I was explained the crop at some point in my childhood, that after the trachea, after the esophagus of a bird, it has like a little pouch full of pebbles, and it swallows the food in there, and the pebbles crush up the food on its behalf. So that's not a it's not a psul, it's not a treif if there's a hole in that. Rabbi Omer afilu nito. Rabbi says even if the zefek is largely gone. Yatsu bnei me'eya v'loy nikvu. If its intestines fell out, but they didn't get a hole, that doesn't make it into a treifa. It's able to retract and go back into place, and it will survive. Nishtabru gafer. If its wings broke, it can get healed. Nishtabru ragle. If its legs broke. Now, when we talk about chicken legs, we're not talking about the chicken legs that we think about with the little sticky three things sticking out on the bottom of the chicken. We're talking about the what do you call it? The drumstick. We're talking about the actual bone part of the leg, not the little thing on the bottom that it hops around on. So that also does not make it into a treifa. Nimratu kanfer. If its feathers are plucked, it's still kosher. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, im not la hanoitza psula. But if the down was taken away, then it's possible. The down is, if you ever saw, open the down pillow, you even saw those little thin feathers, not full-size feathers that you write with, the little down feathers. So that's much closer to the skin of the bird. And if you take it away, it's like a bird that had its skin removed, and it can't survive without it. Yeah. Taner Rabban. Ma'aser Reb Simoy Reb Tzadok. There was a story of Simon Reb Tzadok. Shaholchu la'aver shana b'Lud. They went to preside over the Ibur Hashana in Lud. The Shabsu ba'Oinai, and they spent Shabbos in a place called Oinai. V'hayru betarpachas kerebi bezefek. They paskined on a tarpachas, which we said was one of the three synonyms for a womb. Rebbe bezefek, like Rebbe legabi a crop, right? In our Mishnah, Rebbe had said, even if you take away the entire crop, the bird is still, the oif is still kosher. The Ibayalu, what does that mean? It's a strange statement. Ibayalu, hayru b'tarpachas li'isura karebi bezefek l'hetera. Doesn't mean to say two separate things. We're saying, first of all, hayru b'tarpachas. We paskin like on a tarpachas, even though we had said in the Mishnah that it's going to be kosher if the tarpachas was removed. We paskin not like that lisura, and we paskin like Rebbe opposite the Rabbim, that the Rabbim had said that you can make a nekev in the kappa in the zefek, and Rebbe said you could take the whole thing. We paskin like Rebbe l'hatei. Meaning, do we paskin two things connected the rabbin? Maybe it means to say is we paskin by tarpachas l'hatera the same way Rebbe was matir a zefek. He was makel in a zefek. Avik Rebbe zefek lo svirlu. We're just giving Rebbe as an example of something where makel in, but not that we were paskin like it. Take Gemara says we don't know what that cryptic statement really is coming to tell us. Amar Rabba, V'itei Rabbi Shimon Levi, Gagoy shel zefik, the top of the crop, right? The crop attaches to the trachea. Nidin keveshet, it's treated like the veshet. Heicho, how much of the zefek is treated? What we say, the top of the zefek is treated like the veshet. How much of it is? Rabbi Berabaya kol shenimtach imay. As soon as the top of the crop starts sloping toward the veshet, that's already considered part of the veshet, that it's going to passel with a keiser, I guess, if it has a neck of keiser. Zak Gemara, Yatsu b'nei me'eh. We said if the intestines went out, but they weren't pierced, then it's the animal's going to be kosher. That's only talking about that it wasn't reversed. Either means that it went back into the animal, but in the wrong order. But if it was reversed when it went into the animal, treif, that the animal can't survive. The Rebbe made them, and he put them on there, established them. The Rebbe made people in a specific order. If any of our organs were put in a different place, they wouldn't be able to survive. Tanya nami hachi, Tanya hoya b'meya oimer hu ascha v'yechaynek. He had a different shot in this pasuk. He made them and he established them. Krocha de kulabei. Bnei Yisrael is like a city that has everything in it. Imenu Kayanov, it includes its Kaihanim, Imenu Nevi'av, it has its Nevi'im, Imenu Sarav, it has its lords, and Malachav, it has its kings. Shenema Imenu Pina, from it the cornerstone, Imenu Yeset, from it the pegs for the building. It's a passage that says a city, and then it ends off, what was the verse? It's Kol Noigish Yachtov. It has all of its rulers are within it. Ha'u Aramah, there was an Aramean, the Chazil Ahu Gavra, the Nafal Me'igral Ara, that he saw, that he fell from the roof to the ground. Pake Karse, his stomach split open, Benofik Mayane, and his intestines fell out, which is obviously a serious medical crisis. Asya Lebre, V'shachtekame. He took his son and he shechted him. The person who saw brought the son of the person who fell, and he shechted him ba'achuzas einayim, with sleight of hand. He made it look to that person as if he was shechting his son. Ingid ve'isnech. The person saw it, gasped and moaned. That caused his stomach to retract and his intestines to go back in, and it saved his life. I will speculate. Why do we say Hu Arama? Because it was a guy. This is not a midah of a Bnei Avram Yitzchak Yaakov, even to make a sleight of hand, even to save someone's life through such. We would have come up with a better way of scaring him rather than killing, making as if to kill his son. It's not our midah. We said in the Mishnah that if the animal's legs, try something. Okay. I'm really suffering from the heat wave. I'm going to try turning on the air conditioner, see if it helps things a little bit. My untried air conditioner. Don't ask how I'm sitting outside with the air conditioner. It's a strange room. That Morris does not let us build windows in our outdoor porches, even if they're covered. So I have a porch with 2 windows that are open. See. Let's see if we can overcome the climate. I already feel cooler now that I hear the sound. Are you able to hear me, or is it too loud? It's okay? Okay. Nishtabu ragla. We said if the animal's leg if the oif's leg got broken, it's kosher. Ahut sina de inkuri. There was a basket full of chickens with broken legs. They brought to Rava. Bad ke Rava b'tzaymus hagidin. He checked by the place where basically at the bottom of the pulka, where all of the meat comes to an end, but there's also a bunch of sinews that come to an end over there. So he checked at that junction where the sinews attach, and he saw that they were intact. Va'achsharei. Amar Yehuda Amarav. Shmutas yad v'mehem ksheru. If the by the foreleg of an animal, if the leg slips out of its socket, it's kosher. Shmutas yerech ba'oif treifa. If the thigh bone, meaning the top of the pulka, slips out of its socket, it's treifa. Shmutas gaf ba'oif treifa. But and similarly, even if by the wing, if it slips out of its place, it's treifa. Why is that? L'chayra, why isn't it similar to a behema? We say that the foreleg is kosher. So because this is one of the cases where oif is more chomer than a bird, because with chayish that maybe when it broke, it pierced the lungs. That bone happens to be close to the lungs. So even though we said that all the dinim of a oif are similar to that of a behemoth, except for the one case that we gave, but this is not specifically that in din it's different. It's just that there's a chash that if it breaks, it will pierce something else, which is really a din of the lung, which the neck and the lung is the same. Shmuel says you should check it. You don't have to assume it's treif, but you check it. Chizki Amar ein rei la'oif. Chizki says there's no lung on a oif. V'yechan Amar yesh loi. V'yechan says there is one. V'yeshna ka'ala shel vered ben agfaya, and it has like the leaf of a rose between its wings. My ein real life. What does he mean? Rabbi Yochanan say, what does Chizkiah mean that there's no real life? Elaim the Leslie klal. Does he mean to say there's no lungs? If you open it up, you see that it does have one. Elamai, he must mean that it doesn't become treifa with it. that behema and oif have all the same trephis. Yasser alay and oif shenishbar etzem af bishal nikav krum shel moif. The only difference is that by oif, if it's on the we said this by a seabird, that if its skull broke, even though the membrane of the brain was not pierced, it's still going to be a treifa. That's the only difference. It doesn't say any difference between that and the lungs. So again, so what does it mean? What does it mean to say there's no lungs by oif? Ella ein loy lympho v'loy lichamer. He means to say that there's no chash when it falls or when it gets burnt that it's going to passel it. My time, by a bird, the way it's constructed is that the lungs are well protected by its ribs, and you don't have to be concerned that they were affected by being burnt or by being by falling. For the fact that Rabbi Yochanan disagreed with Chizkiah and said that it does have a lung and it's like a leaf of a rose between its wings. Obviously, Chizkiah disagreed with that. He was arguing directly on Chizkiah. So Chizkiah must have held that there isn't any lungs. Say b'shem Rabbi Yosef Chanina, Nika she'ena baki b'tana goylin. Weis he didn't really know about Tana Goylin. He wasn't familiar with the anatomical structure of Tana Goylin, which I'm sure we could all be sympathetic with. Even though we eat Tana Goylin every day, we wouldn't have been able to answer any of these questions or anything that we've learned so far. Amar of Huna, Amar of Shmutis. Yerech ba'oif ksheir. Rav Huna b'same, Amar Rav Huna of Amar Rav, Shmutas Yerech v'oif ksheir. Rav Huna said b'shem Rav that the slipping out of the thigh bone of the top of the pulka on an oif is kosher. Not like what we had said before, right? We had started before Amar Yehuda Amar Rav, Shmutas Yad v'hem ksheir, Shmutas Yerech v'oif treifa. Amle Rav bar Rav Huna le Rav Huna v'Rabban and also b'mdisa Amar Rav Yehuda mishmei de Rav Amar Shmutas Yerech v'oif treifa. Amalei bari nehara nahara upashte says there are many different rivers that go in different places. Rav held himself that it's kosher, but when he was in a place where they passled, he said that he paskin kafi the minig hamakom. Also, Rabbi Abba asked Rabbi Yirmiyah Abba the kabodik b'tzaimas hagidin. He found Rabbi Abba that he was checking on the place where the sign was connected. Amalei lamlei lamar kulihai. Why are you checking it? If we paskin that if the whole top of the polka if it's slipped out, it's dislocated, so it's totally dislocated, it's not going back, it's still kosher. So what do we care if lower down the tzaimas hagidin it might be dislocated or might be cut? It's irrelevant. Amalei anam asisi adana. I know a Mishnah, behemoth and ischatchu raglah, a behemoth that its legs were cut minar kuvalamata from its ankle. I think that would be like its hak, and on down ksheira, it's kosher. Minar kuvalamayla psula, from on top, it's puzzle. V'chein shenitil tzaimas hagidin, and similarly, if it's there's a tzaimas hagidin on a behemoth as well, even though the bone wasn't cut. That just the same as again is enough to pass it. And Rav says about that the same thing will be on the oif, that the same as again will pass it. So Rav says, okay, you're saying you have a Mishnah that says that will help, but that same as agidin is possible, but it doesn't make any sense. Rav had said before that even if the top of the yarach is taken out, it's kosher. Ishtik is quiet. Amle Dilma Shani Law Ben Shmuta Luchatucha says maybe there's a difference between something that's slipped out and something that's cut. meaning that while it's true that it slipped out of its place, it's dislocated. That's not quite the same as being fully amputated. And over here we're talking about the tzemes hagidim being cut. You're explaining to me what Rav said. Rav was mechalek between us. I'm not sure why he didn't answer him with this. And don't ask, like we've seen many times, that we don't ask questions about on different places in Trefus. One thing can kill and another place can't. You can't make a kal v'chaymer, so to speak, in Tarfus. He quoted that the slipping of the yarech is treifa. He made a shvua. We had the chance to ask Rav Huna. We asked him this question. He said, like the other shot that Rav had said. Rav said, Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. He said it's kosher. The same thing. We saw him looking at the tzemes hagidim. Actually, the same question we had asked before. It's really the same shakavatariya. Or if the tzemes hagidim were taken, Rabbi said the same thing by a knife, that you check the tzemes hagidim. Why we check the tzemes hagidim if it's kosher when it's fully out of the yerach? The army law, hihachi kasher the Rav the Rav. Ishtik actually dilmas shali leila ben shmudel chatu. Bamle avat pash shmaitz the Rav beferish amarav shmudel ksheira v'chad chapsula. Va'at ma biyadcha. So what do you know about this? So he said, Hachi Amar Chia Barashi Amarav Shmuta Sherach Ba'oiv Treifa. I have from Rav Ashi Amarav Chia Barashi Amarav that Shmuta Sherach Ba'oiv is Treifa. Chen Amar Yaakov Bar Idi Amar Rav Yochanan Shmuta Sherach Ba'oiv Treifa. Bar Yaakov Bar Idi the Mola Haber Rav Yochanan Ba'asra the Oirube Chavrusa Lehatera. Like Parchas, if he would have been there when they said that it's mutter, not like he had paskin that it's aser, he would not have even flinched. Damar Chanina Amar Rabbi, Sherach Ba'oiv Ksheira. Because Chanina said to Rabbi that it's kosher. Tanagolis Haisel Chanina Shenishma Yarach Shalah. Chanina had a chicken which has happened to Havil Lefnei Rabbi Veitirulai. Mocha Reb Chanina. Rav Chanina salted it. He was showing it. This is an example of something that Rabbi mattered for me. We're not going to follow any of these psakim lehetera by a yerech that was shamat elef kiha. The shol Rabbi Yosef ben Harayas Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi kederis kana lekama. He asked how much of a hole do you have to have in the kana to make the animal a treifa? Amaloi Mishnah Shlema Shanina. We had this in our Mishnah. Ad Isir Talki. It has to be the size of an Isir Talki. Amaloi Valoi Rachel Achas Haisam Shkinasav Shenekta Kana Shalav also like Kerma Shal Kana V'Chaisa. They put on it a patch over the, even though it was the size of an Isir Talki, and they covered it over and it survived. Amaloi. You're going to be saimich on something that that a story that happened. That we know that the halacha is, and this is the point of this. We see the halacha is that it's aser. They made us basically a crutch for it, a splint, and out of a reed. And that allowed it to live. The fact that the animal survived doesn't prove anything. It could have just survived for a couple of months, but eventually it didn't make it to the full year, so it was a treifa. But the bottom line is that a yerech that was removed out of its place. The halacha is that it's aser. Thank you very much. Stop over here.